I know it was tough scheduling for a lot of busy people, but I'm glad everyone made it. The premise of today's event is basically, especially with a lot of people now with the South Park Commons office reopening, a lot of people are going to be going in and sort of experiencing the community for the first time. So we thought it would be really nice for some of our distinguished alumni to provide the perspective on their experience there and sort of give people inspiration and also advice on what they're embarking on. And to that end, one of the reasons we're recording is that we're hoping that when new members are coming in the future, this might be a resource that we can provide to them to sort of give them a nice look into the types of careers that could follow SPC, the types of things that they might aspire to. So the people who we have joining us today are Trisha Kothari. She is the CEO and co-founder of Unit 21, which is a startup providing a no-code tool set that protects against risks like fraud and money laundering online. We also have Lakshman Sankar, who is working on the Ethereum 2.0, working at the Ethereum Foundation on Ethereum 2.0, specifically ecosystem development and research. And then finally, Grace Chang, who is founder and CEO of Kintsugi. Kintsugi is developing smarter mental health care infrastructure using voice biomarkers. So to identify things like anxiety and depression from short clips of speech. So thank you for joining, everybody. I thought to start off, everybody, we could just go around and you could explain what were you doing prior to SPC and why did you decide to move on from whatever that was?
I can kick it off.
Start.
Or, well, Lakshman, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, fine, I'll start. I thought I muted faster, so. So prior to SPC, I think I had been kind of, I had already started like doing my own thing like 3 to 4 months prior to that, starting my own kind of like journey of figuring out what's next. But before that, I was working as like an ML engineer, product engineer at a bunch of companies. Most recently, I was working at AngelList, doing various things on the fundraising side and on the talent side. I think I knew I wanted to shift gears, and I was also very fascinated by what was going on in crypto at that time. So this was 2017, I guess, like the last bull market. So I think it was clear to me. I'd been following the space for a while, but it seemed clear to me that something that's going to persist is here, and it's the most interesting thing to me, and I want to be a part of it. Yeah, I was just kind of trying to figure that out. Was that the whole question? What was I doing before, and how did I?
Yep, that's about right. And Trisha?
Yeah, so previous to SPC, I worked at the online lending company Affirm. I was there for a while, for 4 years, and or almost 4 years, and so it was, I think, timely for me that okay, my time at Affirm is over, and then I was thinking what I want to do next. And entrepreneurship's always appealed to me for many reasons, but I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do next. So I had a few ideas, and even at Affirm, I was exploring some of those ideas, but then I wasn't really sold onto anything just yet. And so before leaving Affirm, I was thinking of, okay, what really should I do? And then I came across South Park Commons, and I thought this was a really great way for me to just meet other people, be alongside a community where everyone's exploring in this in between two cycles of their career kind of phase, and that's what let me know.
I think right before South Park Commons, my story is probably pretty similar to others here. I was working at a startup. It was a machine learning startup in security and authentication. I was the second engineering hire and head of product, and we were working on authentication using and extracting feature vectors from wearables and mobile devices to uniquely identify individuals on gate. It was an extremely interesting endeavor. We grew the company from just ourselves to 5 people, where we ended up raising a fairly large round of $20 million from NEA. And then with 5 people on the team, growing it to past 20, it was a good time for me to start to explore what was personally meaningful to me. And so I took a bit of a break, and it was really nice being able to meet other members from South Park Commons who were in a similar space of exploration. I knew a lot of machine learning engineers that were already there. And I think one of my first interactions was Yaroslav hosting a ML reading session week to week. And at the time, I was just starting to work with Rima, who's on the call today, co-founder and machine learning scientist. We met at an OpenAI hackathon, and it was just great being pulled into this community through this reading group. And it was just spectacular being able to hear about all the interesting things that everyone was working through and exploring at a time when I think everyone had like the freedom to.
That's awesome. So I'm curious, all of you were sort of in this period of exploration, which is what SPC is for. What were your goals for that time? Were you trying just to figure out what to do next? Did you already have in mind that you wanted to start a company and the idea was just to figure out working on what? What were you sort of looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can start. Oh, go ahead. You this time.
Great minds. Yeah, no, so I did have a time frame of 6 months that I gave myself. And that was, to a certain degree, the amount of savings I put aside for this particular exploration. So I gave myself that time frame based on that. I knew I wanted to start a company, and I already had a few ideas before coming in, but I didn't really work on the idea that I had the strongest idea I had, and that did not eventually become the idea that we worked on. And so my goal was really to explore and to start a company by the end of that 6-month time frame.
Yeah, I actually was like a little open-ended. I kind of, I had the itch that something was going on with crypto. I also wanted to start something again. My first career thing was starting something, but like we basically like failed very, very hard. So I wanted to kind of, with my new experience, see if there's something else. But I think what I was to get very meta, like what I was looking for really was, I wanted conviction that this something is worth 10 to 20 years of my life, and I wasn't sure I wanted to end up in crypto. I also wasn't sure I wanted to start something, but I knew I had to do a lot of like reading and talking and, introspecting to figure that out.
I wish I could say that I knew from the first days that, yes, I am going to be here for 6 months and no more, no less, but I kept it fairly open-ended. I really wanted to meet people to kind of stretch my imagination as to how we could impact healthcare. My experience had been in signal processing for security, and I really wanted to see how it could be applied in a new space that was personally meaningful. And there are a lot of people at South Park Commons that were pursuing really interesting endeavors. And I felt that also gave me the courage to push a little bit further. There were many opportunities to kind of stretch and extrapolate a lot more out of these like seedlings of an idea. And South Park Commons overall had just been so overwhelmingly positive, I think, for us. Rima and myself, who kind of felt otherwise, like a little straggler founders, not really sure if we had a place anywhere because our ideas felt so different, really felt like we had a home at South Park Commons. And in fact, even one of our first investors ended up being someone from South Park Commons, and it had definitely shaped the trajectory of our company. So We ended up staying there for, I think, just shy of a year, but it was a really, really fun endeavor.
That's awesome. I'm also curious, just starting with Grace, I guess, how did you actually get introduced to SPC in the first place? And then why did you decide to sort of take the leap and join?
If I recall correctly, I had a friend, Mimi Zhu, who was heavily involved in just different machine learning groups. And so when I was pulled into the reading group with Yaroslav, it was very relevant to the works that we were investigating, which was in signal processing and being able to identify depression and anxiety voice biomarkers through different types of machine learning techniques, and just being able to have a community to talk about different new state of the art was really appealing, because I didn't actually see too many of those. And I was excited when I met Rima at the OpenAI hackathon, but short of that, there weren't really too many in-person communities like that.
Yeah, I was just like hacking on stuff, and I think funnily enough, I was working on hacking on like an NFT project, and kind of like through that met someone who was working on like a startup in the space. And I think she was considering joining SPC and didn't end up joining, but kind of clued me in. And I lived at that time like right around the corner. So I was like, this seems like a good, I was impressed by the people I met. And it seemed like a good sort of place to escape a lot of the sort of groupthink of the Bay Area, like a place to get some cover from all of that and just like talk about, you know, the future and like what you're interested in, and kind of like get to conviction. So yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, for me, this is the most Silicon Valley story, but I was taking a walk with my friend at South Park, and then I saw Ruchi, and Ruchi's really famous in India. And so I went up to her and I was like, oh, I know you and you're cool. And then she said that, oh, she has a thing called South Park Commons, which is obviously right there. And that's how I learned about it. And then I came for an event, and it seemed like a group of, you know, interesting, cool people who want to do something different. But I think what really got me finally convinced I should do this is when I was still at Affirm, I decided, okay, let me try working on some things. And then I went to coffee shops, and it's just, you know, you can't even go to the bathroom without having to take your laptop. And then it's just not a place, like you can't really start. It's very difficult to start a company, and most companies fail in that -1 to 0 phase. And so I realized the importance of a community, and from what I saw with what Ruchi had built, it was actually meaningful, and that got me excited.
Awesome. So after you all joined, how did you most often engage with the community? Was it, you know, meeting people one-on-one, being part of a squad or a reading group, or just spending time in the space and sort of meeting people there? And is there anything that sort of sticks out as like the most emblematic time from your experience that you really remember? Let's start with Trisha this time.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people have very different approaches to the community, and by no means is there, you know, it's whatever works for people. My approach was very much like I went there every single day, and that was where I was working for the entire 6 months that I was actively a member of the community. And though initially I was exploring for maybe a week or so, and then I met with Ruchi through Ruchi's office hours, and I was telling her about some ideas, and then I told her about 3 ideas, and then 2 of them she was like, this is nonsense, and then one of them she said, oh, there's another person here, Clarence, you should talk to him about it. And so we grabbed breakfast the next day at the park, and then we said, okay, let's start, you know, doing research into this idea. And so we did a bunch of research into this through, you know, like a lot of, and there was like a whole set of crazy set of incidents that happened, but then we decided, okay, we want to start the company in this space. And so we built a prototype, and everything at SPC was a home throughout this entire phase of deciding to start the company. And then we decided, okay, we think there are people who will buy it maybe at some point what we're building. And on the basis of that, we raised a seed round, and and all of that happened during SPC. So it was the home to the very beginnings of the company.
Yeah, for me, so I actually was a pretty bad SPC member for the first month or two, but then I think Ashley might have messaged me. I was like, you got to show up more, and so I started showing up and kind of hiding, because I'm pretty ADD, so it's hard for me to be in an open space and actually focus. But I started hiding in the loft, basically. No, it was a good thing. I'm glad you did, because I ended up meeting everyone much faster once I started showing up. But for me, SPC was largely kind of it was largely one-on-one stuff, because I'm better in those encounters. So it was someone would share an article somewhere and I would respond, and that would lead to getting coffee, and then now having this new friend and kind of just talking about that thing at every tea time. I think tea times were the most SPC iconic thing for me, because it was just you kind of knew what everyone was thinking about, and it was just a chance to catch up and let loose and talk about all those things.
I love tea time. Tea time was one of my favorite events every week. And I think that from tea time led to a lot of one-on-one times, but I was definitely in the space very frequently. I think in the early days, almost every day. And it was nice to get out of my apartment in the Mission and cycle to South Park. I think a lot of people saw me cycle in and out of there very often. I think one of my most memorable events at South Park Common, and there were many, from the hackathon that was really fun in bringing everyone together, to these sort of one-on-one coffees, to I think one of us organized a Tough Mudder where 20 of us went out to go through all of these series of I don't even know how we got out there, but it was really a lot of fun. But one that left quite a strong impression was when we did a values retreat and discussed the values of South Park Commons at an offsite. And this was at Rishi's place in Sonoma. And it was just a really wonderful way to talk about diving into the deep end of what it could be to explore some of our most deepest and strongest passions, and being able to see Rishi operate South Park Commons really left a fine impression, because I myself don't have that much operating experience, and being able to see someone be able to pull together such an esteemed crew of people working at the same thing in such a unique way really led to a lot of friendships that I still hold dear today.
That's awesome. So I'm curious for any of you, but I guess starting with Lakshman, was there anything about SPC that surprised you, that didn't match your expectations going into it?
That's a good question. It's hard to remember exactly what my expectations were. I think going in, just because I had been working from WeWorks and stuff like that, and coffee shops prior to that, and the general sort of MO at a WeWork where people are trying to figure out their startup or whatever is people aren't so open all the time to talk about whatever. There isn't as much kind of general flow of ideas, and so when I think about it now, it's pretty obvious. This is sort of, I think, the gap that SPC fills very wonderfully, a place to not be completely heads down. But that definitely caught me off guard. It creates a different environment when you're there, and even within the Slack channels and stuff like that, people are generally kind of just, everyone's kind of looking, so you can kind of like initiate conversation much easier.
I think maybe what caught me by surprise was how collegiate the environment felt. It was a lot like you're on campus, in school, but not really studying the same things, but able to pop into different courses of study that different people were just experts in. And it just felt so great having that as part of your day-to-day as you were trying to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of things. One really positive surprise I had through my SPC experience was just the variety of types of work that people were doing. And I knew that going in, but I was still very surprised. There were authors and there were people working on like nothing to do with technology, or at least, this typical standard startup way of thinking in Silicon Valley. And I think that was very interesting just to get all of the different perspectives. I also, another thing that was like a really positive surprise was there were a lot of other, despite the diversity and interests, there were still enough people interested in what you want to do or the kinds of things that you wanted to do. And so I, of course, met my co-founder at SPC, but we also made a lot of founder friends. And then, when we had any particular issues or we were discussing an investor, there was always someone to talk to who was just going through that same phase of life or of the company. And I didn't appreciate it as much, but I think that really is a big reason. The absence of that is a reason that a lot of founders think that it's a very lonely journey, which it is, but at least that makes it a little less lonely.
That's awesome. So sort of along the lines of expectations going in, if you could give any advice to yourself when you were starting SPC or just broadly your sort of period of exploration, what would it be? And maybe more specifically, what would you do differently from how you approached it at the start? Let's start with Grace, if you're ready.
Yeah, I think so. If there was anything I could do different, the advice that I would have for myself is to take it slow and enjoy it while you can. Take as many opportunities to observe, participate, and lead events. Sometimes it's very difficult to get to know everyone that is in these several different orbits around South Park Commons, but by being able to lead events of your own interest, you're able to draw in those who also may share similar interests, and it's a really great way to meet individuals.
Yeah, I think, yeah, very, very similar answer. I mean, I think the obvious thing, which is so true, and it's even more true than I think it is now probably, is like, take it super slow. Actually, it's funny, like my wife's going through like a kind of career reevaluation moment, and that's kind of like the thing I keep reminding her. It's like, you're at this like local maximum, like in this state space, and you can like jitter yourself into a local maximum nearby, or you can like take the time to step back and see the entire space and then find this global maximum that is like, that you really want to go towards, even if it means that you like kind of start at the bottom or something like that. And it takes a long time. I think I might've been there the longest of the three of us. I think I was there a year and a half, something like that. And I definitely started feeling the pressure around the year mark, because that's sort of like the meme kind of canonical time people leave. And, people who had started when I started were leaving, and I was like, oh, should I have figured my shit out by now? And I mean, I think I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. So and maybe I should have stayed even longer, who knows? And then the other thing is share cool stuff and read other people's cool stuff. I think a lot of like, there's so many high value connections that could be made in SPC at any point in time. if everyone is sharing all the cool things they're thinking about and responding to all the cool things other people are thinking about. So I'm sure there's so many co-founder relationships that started that way.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna jump on that move slow train. And I think for me, I'd worked my entire life. I'd never really like taken time to think of what I want to do next. And so even from day one, I had urgency that, okay, I'm going to get XYZ done by a particular day. And I think it worked fine. I'm happy, and I think, you'll be happy no matter what you do. But I think it would have been good to, to Lakshman's point, it's just like not feeling rushed, because most people on this call will do that no matter what. That's like most people's personalities. And so it's okay to just like think, because that's really the goal of SPC.
Awesome. So I'm wondering, for everybody, sort of how did you settle on, and what was the process like of settling on the stuff that you're working on now? And Trisha, you talked a bit about this in terms of how you met Clarence and started working with him. But could you speak a bit more on the process that you guys actually went to settle on what you're doing?
Yeah, so I met Clarence, and I previously worked at Affirm, and I was very early on there. So I was an engineer for a few years, and then I moved over to product. And by the time I left Affirm, I was leading identity at Affirm. So I had some intuition of, okay, this is the kind of things that interest me or might be interesting to start a company around that. And Clarence's background in machine learning and security, he wrote the O'Reilly book on machine learning. He's a lecturer in Berkeley machine learning and security as well. So he has deep expertise in that, and also had some intuition. And so Ruchi told us to meet, and so we met. And so we both knew that, okay, there's something in this like fraud, anti-money laundering space that could be interesting to explore. And so we said, okay, but we only have our data points, only our opinions right now, which is two data points. So we said, okay, let's go and reach out to folks on LinkedIn. So we reached out to 300 folks on LinkedIn who had anti-money laundering in their title. And incidentally, we got connected to the head of anti-money laundering at eBay through that. And he was a really weird guy. He got really excited about us. At the time, we had no company, no product. We're not even committed to work together. And he said, hey, I'm going to do an RFP at eBay, or I'm doing an RFP, and I'll bump you up to the final stage of the demo if you're interested. So we said, okay. And then we went back. We basically were living in SPC for 3 weeks, and we built a prototype. And then we went down to eBay, and I got one of my friends from Affirm to come. So it seemed like a 3-person company and not a 2-person company. And then we did a demo of the product, and then they really liked it. And they told us we're the front runners. And ultimately we didn't get the deal because we didn't really exist as a company. And it was like 2 people, no fundraise, no customers. But I think that gave us this validation that was really helpful to have before, instead of just, saying that, okay, I'm going to start a company in XYZ and not really know that, okay, whatever is my intuition, is that did I at least check it a little bit to make sure that is the reality. And so we use that feedback and on what they liked about the product to then go to a lot of other companies. And then we said that, okay, what eBay really liked is that this is going too much into the specifics, but they can use their own data variables. And so they may have a data variable like auction item type, and they can then write a statistical model seeing that, okay, if the auction item type is a couch, I might want to look at different things than if it's a Pokemon card. And so we checked our intuition again with what we got from eBay with other customers. And and that was basically, we decided, okay, this is it. And we decided to raise a seed round. And that was a process. I think one thing that we did well, which, it's really hard to say in hindsight, whether it's a local maxima, global maxima, but I think it's also good to sometimes just like commit to something and then just do it. And you might fail anyways and have that as the expectation, instead of just like thinking a lot between decision A and B. And actually, if you just did both of them, maybe the amount of time through that would have been less than the time taken to decide. And so, but I think that can of course lead you into a trap of local maxima. So there's no right answer to this, whatever that time frame is. But I think that was really helpful for us to just decide, okay, we want to do this.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really have too much. Well, I think there were things I did. I don't know that I had like a strict process. I did make the decision to SPC, but it was kind of an interesting one in that, like when I left SPC, I think I was the only person who was like still openly interested in crypto. So it wasn't like, it was largely made, while I made it at SPC, it was made by doing things outside of SPC largely. So the first thing I did was just like a lot of reading, a lot of kind of talking to people. I think one way that's like sort of maybe underrated to figure out like how an industry works and what your role might be in it is working with lots of companies. Maybe it's not underrated. I guess it's probably not, but like I did a lot of consulting, a little bit of angel investing, went to a lot of conferences, talked at a few conferences, and just kind of spent a lot of time gathering data and just kind of forming. I think there were two things. One was sort of figuring out that, you know, crypto is an industry that I see myself in long term, and the other was like, okay, where do I want to insert myself? And both questions, I just gather a lot of data and then like, you know, synthesize and think and plan. Yeah, I think consulting and conferences are like great free education, or not free. I mean, not free education, since everything costs time, but you know.
I almost feel like the time of when I left SPC, it just happened to coincide with COVID. We're planning on returning back to the office. And so I think Rima and myself had to really think about, oh, we really need to get more serious about figuring out what we were going to do next. And we had built a consumer-facing voice journaling application that actually ended up being a really great voice repository, specifically for machine learning, annotated with some of the ground truth labels that we need in making these sort of depressed and anxious predictions. And it was a great experience. I think just short before that, we spoke to Kristen at CRV. She was one of the investors that dropped in and did like a working session. And I think she threw an idea out there that we deliberated on, you know, for maybe a few minutes, but then it really started to sink in that, oh, maybe now that we have something that is able to detect depression and anxiety from 20 seconds of free form speech, maybe we license that as an API. And she had talked about different business models. And this was something that we started to test as, like what Lakshman said, going to conferences, going to these sort of panels where executives would speak at, first at like a panel of insurance companies. And it was just enough to dip our toes in to kind of dig in a little bit deeper. I think from a failed investor meeting, they were still impressed with what we had to say. And so we were then hand selected as one of 10 companies out of 2,600 to work in Techstars United Healthcare's cohort and work closely with about 430 different healthcare executives and fleshing out what is now our go-to-market. We now have a master services agreement and a statement of work with United Health Group and Amazon Care. And we are integrating our API into their clinical call centers, telehealth platforms, remote patient monitoring apps. And yeah, that was like the big push out of South Park Commons. We raised a little bit of money there, but then shored up our pre-seed of about $1.5 million. And then here we are today, thinking that we were going to raise maybe like a Series A at the end of this year, but now we're already getting like preemptive A offers. And it's been, I would say, a really exciting process because some of those South Park Commons people in between are are kind of involved in this process. So it's been, you know, I can't emphasize enough the types of friendships that you build here can be really everlasting for not only your startup, but just the types of long-term working relationships you want here and beyond.
Awesome. On that note, I know that Grace and Trisha, you both found co-founders while you were at SPC, and Lakshman, you didn't find a co-founder, but seems like you worked with lots of different people. Do you all have any advice that you would give to people about selecting those that they work with? And maybe if you want to talk a bit about how you found the people that you're working with now.
I think in large part, I found Rima almost haphazardly. This was through that OpenAI hackathon here in SF. Rima lives in Sacramento. And so she made a concerted effort to meet people like her. And at this hackathon, it was particularly unusual because there were typically at hackathons, there just aren't that many women. And so another aspect that I found to be really engaging about South Park Commons is just this openness to dive deep into any different set of areas. And Rima and myself felt really welcome. Rima, I think about this time last year, was very pregnant. And so again, in Silicon Valley and SF, like there's not always a warm and good positive place for women who want to pursue their passions, especially technical ones. A lot of times I think Rima and I have found that it's hard being an Asian woman to really, you know, be seen. And so this was like kind of the first time in our life where we really felt like we could pursue what we wanted, and in an environment that supported it. And it was already behind really like esteemed women that have already done it multiple times over. And so we just felt like it brought the courage and confidence for us to keep working on this specific problem in mental health, because we ourselves had faced that challenge of accessing care and just looking at it through a different lens. And that for us is just being engineers and looking at it as, oh, well, maybe this is an opportunity to improve infrastructure.
Yeah, for me also, it was haphazard, as Grace mentioned. I met Clarence because Ruchi said we should talk to Clarence. And I feel like that's a very unsatisfying answer, because if I was in, you know, if I was just starting and everyone's like, oh, luck helped me. But I do think that luck is like the ratio, and the only way to increase the denominator is just to you know, meet more people, to actually engage more with the community. And so my only recommendation, given that this is such a luck heavy process, regardless of what you end up doing, is just to actually engage with the community. I think the folks who really strongly engage with the community, my sense is that they actually got a lot more out of it than people who just really thought of it as, okay, I'll come in once during tea time and that's it. And I think that that's pretty much the only deterministic way to make sure that you get into those opportunities, whether it's a co-founder or whatever it is, and startup idea.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add here, seeing as I don't have a co-founder.
Cool. So along those lines, is there anyone that when you look back at your time at SPC sticks out as somebody who really inspired you in your work? And is there anybody who you still keep in touch with? Maybe we can start with Lakshman this time.
Yeah. I think there are a few people, and I still do keep in touch with them. Some of them are, I mean, some of them I think were partially interested in crypto, so kind of it gave us, you know, like we talked about some of that stuff as well. Paul and Jiu come to mind. Aaron Eng as well. I think he was kind of like very futurist, and so we had some fun conversations. Yeah, I feel weird picking one person who inspired me the most. Everyone was very inspiring, and I think it's cool that people are doing different things and are just very intense about it.
I still keep in touch with Yang. I loved her energy, and it was always really fun being able to talk about everything from tea to machine learning to pretty much everything in between. She was really a good thinking partner and just fun to just talk about all kinds of things. We still are quite close with a lot of people. Yeah, I also feel weird about like calling out individuals. Andrew Parker we're still quite close with. He was somebody that helped, I think, shape how we should think about pricing in our first round, and continues to be really a great person that we lean on. But there are so many others. There really are. Everyone has like a great deal of expertise, and it's nice to kind of dig back into that well and then offer, you know, whatever you yourself can offer back into the community.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. But yeah, I think everyone's really inspiring in a lot of different ways. And so there wasn't a specific role model, but usually I'd, you know, see Yaroslav working on some ML research, and you know, I'd be inspired that, oh wow, he's working really hard, even I should work hard. And there'll be a lot of other people doing similar things like that. I think one special thing about SPC is that if you do end up starting a company, and there are other folks who also end up starting a company, you almost become like a cohort. And so that initial cohort, at least for, you know, several months after, that becomes like a sounding board for how you should hire for, or so what type of equity should you give your team, and a lot of the questions that they become the sounding board and your peers through that. And so that's been really helpful as well. That I didn't appreciate was before joining SPC was the peer group that I got with it.
Cool. So shifting gears a little bit, when did you all decide that it was time to graduate from SPC, and how did you make that decision? Maybe we can start with Trisha this time.
Yeah, we decided. So I think the eBay incident happened, and then we said, okay, let's talk to more companies. And so we talked to more companies, and we tried to sell this idea. And we didn't really have a product then, but we basically showed some kind of prototype with what we found to be effective. And then people were getting really interested. And so we said, okay, there's something here. We don't quite know what it is. And so we decided, okay, let's raise around, and I think it was definitely not easy the seed round, because there were a lot of unproven things, there were a lot of unanswered questions, and so even while we were raising, we had conviction that we'll make it work somehow, but we didn't have conviction on what exactly that would be. And but we somehow caught a seed round together, and I think that was really hard. It's only become easier after, which is also great. You know, I think people never talk about that, is that the 0 to 1 or -1 to 0, whatever you call it, is definitely the hardest phase. And if you can make it through that, then almost everything will be much easier after that. But yeah, once we raised our seed round, we had to graduate from SPC. We were required to, and so we did that. But it was also then time for us to say that, okay, let's commit to it and make this work.
Yeah, I actually had already been doing some work with and around the Ethereum Foundation at that time. But I think I met kind of like the team working on like Ethereum protocol research. So kind of like what's called ETH2 and other things. And kind of like once I met them and kind of saw what they were about, it was like, it became pretty obvious to me that this would, you know, I should focus on helping this team and figuring out how to make this team successful. And I think once that became sort of obvious to me, and I had some rapport there, I was like, okay, now that I know that this is like what I want to do with like 95% of my time, it's probably time to leave. It wasn't that super of an obvious of a decision, but I feel like it was just like I still work completely remotely for the most part. And so in theory could have definitely stayed. But it just felt like if there was any time, it seemed like a clear-cut time.
Yeah, I think there was a certain point where there were some real work priorities, and with our pre-seed funding, we had to leave South Park Commons and get to work. And so I would have loved to have stayed that much longer, but I'm not sure how productive I would have been in the community given some of those other obligations.
Cool. So my next question is maybe a little too abstract, but I'm going to give it a try. What do you think are the biggest things that changed in terms of your mindset and your view of your work and what you wanted to do from between when you started at SPC and when you finished? So obviously, to some extent, you probably executed on the things that you just expected to from the beginning. But was there anything that changed about the way you were looking at that stuff?
Yeah, there were actually two really big things for me. One was SPC. I don't know if this is still a thing, but there was like a mantra somewhere on some wall that said something about like thinking about what you're going to work on, what for 10 years or something like that, and kind of seeing that every day or however frequently I came in, just like really etched that into my mind, and I think I felt much more long-term thinking when I left than when I joined, much less kind of reactive with regards to career stuff, which was a huge advancement, I thought. And the other thing was, I think, seeing how many different ways people kind of like make working life work made me very open to very just like it just kind of like widened the design space of life a lot for me. Like it's kind of hard to describe all the things that I can constitute work for me now. They don't really fall cleanly into one bucket, and I think that would have scared me a lot more prior to joining SPC.
I think for myself, the idea of broadening the scope of what you think you can accomplish, the idea and the mission of being able to dive deep into the unknown, I think really left something that was very deep for myself. I felt after leaving South Park Commons that what I thought I knew was not quite even like a little decile of that. And so I think it was just really great to be open to that type of breadth.
Yeah, for me, the biggest learning was really on the value of community. And I always valued community in the past, but I think in the back of my head, I had this idea that people talk way too much about all these like touchy-feely San Francisco ideals. And I think when actually, I'm very grateful to SPC because that community, it's hard to really say what would have happened without the community, but the community gives you a lot of accountability. It gives you strength and seeing other people go through what you are going through. And I just value that a lot more now than I used in the past because I am now a fortunate beneficiary of that. And that's something that stayed with me.
Awesome. Those are all really good answers. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask, just so people who aren't as familiar can know, like, what have you all been up to since leaving? What are the biggest things you've been doing? So maybe we can start with Grace.
Well, we're not a small company anymore. I think we just hired our 10th full-time. We have 26 part-time that are converting to full-time. We're fully remote. And so Lakshman's comment of thinking about what work looks like during the pandemic has really made us think about like, what is our core mission and how can we make work for everyone, especially those with alignment. And yeah, we've just been working hard on making sure that we can meet our SLAs. We're probably close to about 5 million in ARR by the end of this year. And so I couldn't be more excited. I think our team is extraordinary. We have extraordinary talent. Dream and I were joking yesterday that the people that we're interviewing today, I feel like like I would get cut out of like the first pass of interview. So it's a good thing that yeah, it's a good thing that we're founders in that case. So I think it keeps us on our toes. Everyone on our team is quite remarkable. We hired our chief medical officer, which was pretty extraordinary. He was an advisor on our team, very well renowned, and I can pinch myself. It doesn't, sometimes it doesn't fully feel like these sort of things are happening, but it's nice to be grounded when I come back to these sort of events, because I can see that it was not that long ago, just a year ago, that things were so different. And so I think for a lot of you, who knows what the future will bring. But yeah, it's really great to have that community, as Trisha mentioned. It makes all the difference.
Lakshman, just as you unmuted yourself. Yeah, so it's been a while since we graduated. We graduated December 2018. And it's been a really surreal journey where what we built is a suite of no-code tools for financial institutions to be able to identify potential suspicious activity. And so it's been a very crazy time of ups and downs. The company is now close to 40 people. We're growing very rapidly and hiring a lot. So if you know friends, or if you decide that you want to join a company in the space, then definitely hit me up. And yeah, I think I'm really grateful to the time at SPC, without which I think a lot of this would have been at least a lot more difficult than it was.
Yeah, I graduated, I think it was Jan 2020, so beginning of last year. And since then, kind of just gone, yeah, just much deeper in kind of protocol development and sort of, I'm calling it ecosystem development. That, we're sort of making that title up as we go a little bit, but it's like trying to figure out all the things, like, the crypto is kind of a weird place where there's very little central control, sort of by design. And even the work that the Ethereum Foundation does is very behind the scenes and more delegatory than kind of like, architecting things. And so I've been involved kind of like in both like the thinking of like what that means, but also in kind of like supporting a lot of the projects in the space around the protocol. Like, running kind of like grants rounds and stuff like that, but also have been quite involved deeply in like some of the R&D for kind of like the protocol itself. That's kind of my full-time gig, but then, I think I don't think anyone really knew that kind of like the next kind of cycle was about to start. But and since it started, I've been involved with a lot of other stuff as well, like as stuff comes up, investing and things like that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody, again, for making the time to be here. I found it super interesting and informative. I've never been an SPC while the space was open, so to me, it feels a little bit like performing archaeology on like a lost culture. So it was really nice to get people's perspectives and memories from that. But yeah, thank you so much. This was super, super helpful. Yeah, I think we can end it there.
Thank you guys so much. It was good to see everyone.
Thank you so much. It was really nice to see everyone.
Yeah, good seeing
We'll
folks.
have to do it again. Come by tea time in the backyard on Thursday if you miss us. Yeah. Okay, guys. Bye.
Bye.